Hello, this is Chris Haskell from They Live by Film. For those that don't know us, Adam, Zach, and we built a podcast over the last 2 years that's a combination of film discussion from 3 very different perspectives, as well as industry interviews with the leaders in boutique Blu-ray and 4K community. We started with Dev Crocodile, but over time we've been lucky enough to speak with Arrow Video, Severin, Mondo Macabro, Vinegar Syndrome, Radiance, Indicator, most of the OCN partner labels. It's been a blast. You can find us wherever you podcast, and also actually recently as part of Someone's Favorite Production Podcast Network. We hope to see you online.
Hello there, and welcome back to the Disc Connected. I'm here with Nico B of Cult Epics, who has been around for quite some time, looking at, I believe, just over 3 decades at this point, which is astonishing. Nico, thanks for doing this with me today, sir.
Thanks for inviting me. Yeah, I sound very old.
No, it's not even necessarily about that. It's about, people have been talking about home video dying literally since the 90s. And to have a company that is so, it's in the name. It's cult. It's something that is focused on something not mainstream. And that's a lot to be applauded. This is a big deal for a company like that.
Yeah. Well, we started with VHS, and that was in Amsterdam at the time. That's, 35 years ago. It was kind of when Celtru didn't exist yet, and we started a mail order, which was called, at that time, Cult Video. Mm-hmm. We started a mail order, selling rare cult movies, like things you could see at the midnight cinema, like Salo or Pink Flamingos or, anything you can think of. Clockwork Orange was hard to find those days.
Right.
But Holland was a paradise for a lot of collectors because everything was uncut. You just had to deal with the subtitles. But anyway, many people would go to video stores to find, rare uncut films in the day, and anything was released, nearly, And so I just went to the studio and basically just asked them, what if I buy 100 copies of Clockwork Orange? And they would give me a deal instead of a rental fee. And then I would sell them through my mail order, and pretty soon that became a phenomena in Europe. We would sell to all the other stores, cult video stores, similar like Videodrome in Berlin. Uncut films they couldn't get anywhere else. And that was the kind of start. And then we started a couple of video stores called Videotheek. And then my girlfriend at the time, Sitan, from Christian Dads, she came up with the name Cult Epics as a label because people were looking for stuff I could not supply, like Bettie Pates or Cannibal Holocaust or Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. So basically we start buying the rights of films I loved and I wanted to release. And that was VHS,
Wow. And around that time, were you seeing these coming across well and getting a good response from everybody?
Oh yeah, it was actually a huge success because we had a mail order, and we got orders from all over Europe, And then the video stores. I first started in a kind of like a bookstore, cinema bookstore called Sine Qua Non. And the guy was like, "Hey, I'm selling more videos than books and posters. What's going on?" So VHS sell-through wasn't even existing yet, but it was a huge success because that's what collectors wanted. And we're literally talking about, 35 years ago, 36, I don't know. Yeah.
The fact that this was big then, and there's so many things I want to compare from, what has happened from 35 years ago to what's happening in 2024. So we'll get to that in a little bit. But the big thing is this was hot, like all over Europe, and done in a way that was, people seeking out these titles that couldn't be found for years and literally relying on filling out a form and hoping that they get something mailed to them. Seemingly, it'll take a while to get to them back then, right?
Like I said, I had a store, so people would come to the store. And so they would buy it directly. And then through mail order, we basically, within a week, they would get it. But often UK was a problem because of the video nasty law. Often, they didn't arrive or they were taken by customs, and often we had
Right.
to send the tapes in a Disney cover around it and put only the reels of the VHS in the mail, so they couldn't see the cover of Faces of Death or Necromantic or anything like that. That was completely banned. And sometimes we go with a car to UK and go to our favorite store in Camden and give them we fill up the trunk and swap videos with them. They had in the UK and we had in Holland. Yeah.
What was there ever a time through any of these methods of trying to share the good word that you got caught, or that there was any situations that got super awkward for you?
Well, Citan got caught at one point because we had, and not because of the videos, it was weird. She got caught because we had a Mercedes with run on gas. Well, in UK at that time, I don't know if they still is the same, they didn't know what gas was. So we had this big gas tank in the back of the car, and they thought something's going to happen or explode or anything. So she was stuck in the customs for like a day, and they left the videos alone.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So everything's going well in Europe, and then word started to get around, right? You started to get a lot of attention.
Yeah, well, we did get some interest in America for people who order through mail order, and that would sometimes take a while to arrive. I started realizing there was a lot of like so-called mail orders who would sell they would call them public domain films,
Right.
and they're literally bootlegging my original VHS tape and make copies of them and sell them in the US. I saw a lot of that subtitles films appearing later on. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, before we get into the Tarantino stuff and everything else that's happened with cult epics, one of the things that we should probably hash out for anybody that's not got a lot from cult epics, what do you view as what do you view cult epics as? Is there a certain style that you go for with the films that you're after?
Well, it changes all the time, but one of my main criteria is that what sets me apart from a lot of the labels, I guess, is that even if it's extreme and whatever, for me it has to be or provocative. It has to be like art house, like it has to be an artistic made film.
Right.
So I prefer some directors above other directors. I prefer Tinto over Joe D'Amato, or I didn't want to do only pure exploitation. We would sell those mail order wise, but that's not what I wanted to release because the time you have to do all this stuff. And so I wanted to have kind of, cool movies which people kind of forgot about or don't even know about. And they have all the elements. They're like provocative, but at the same time, you're watching a movie which is entertaining, but also makes you think. And that has always been on my mind. It's basically my personal taste, I guess.
Well, and honestly, that comes across all of the cult epics titles I've seen throughout the years. They absolutely do that. They have this interesting staying power. They have a unique way of looking at things. They are generally names that are not super well known, and I appreciate them greatly for so much of that. So your curation has been pretty great over the years.
Well, thank you.
So going back to the 90s, everything's going on in Europe. You find out you're getting bootlegged in the US, and then you made a pilgrimage and moved over to the US in that time, right?
Well, what happened is I actually started out as a music label distributor, etc. before I got into film. Well, before that, I was at the Film Academy of Fine Arts, studying film. But as I said, my girlfriend at the time, Chitan, she wanted to see where her career would bring her. We would go on tour all the time, where her career would bring her in the US. So she suggested to move to the US. And I said, sure. Because I really wanted to make films, like underground films.
Right.
And I said, okay, well, I've done 5 years cold videotape now. And, that's what I said to myself. That's what I would do. And then I will just make films, whatever I want to make, and maybe have my label there, start releasing things. And that's kind of what happened. Although, we broke up a year later or so, but I stayed in the US.
Fascinating. So when you came over to the US, were you basically trying to do the exact same mission, and was that working out the same way for you?
Well, like I said, I started, I was friends with this guy called Ross Williams of Christian Dad. We would
Yes.
tour together, etc. And he had an idea of a movie. He showed me a photo. It looked like Delicatessen. And there was a guy with an apple in his mouth and like on an altar or something. And it was called Pig. And I was like, well, that looks like a funny movie, but that's not what I was interested in. So we talked about what our interests were, and from that we made Pig. And I was busy with that. I was not releasing anything yet in the US, except I released the first DVDs of Bettie Page because I had the world rights. Three Bettie Page related videos, and that was probably one of the first 100 DVDs released in the US, or 1,000, I can't remember. And that was a pretty good success. And from there on, I started licensing films for the US, but that took a while, honestly.
I'm undoubtedly. I mean, the move from tape obviously to DVD was a big one, but to be one of the first into that's a huge deal, especially with a title like Bettie Page films. That's not something that you would think would be in the first immediate glut of films to come out on DVD. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Next, I feel like we should probably talk about the Tarantino aspect.
Well, it happened actually in Amsterdam.
Okay.
When I had my video store, we had a lot of celebrities, especially musicians, who would play in Paradiso. All these rock bands, they would play there, and then they would go to my video store because they knew about it, or maybe they recommended for a day trip in Amsterdam to go by my video store. I don't know, but we got all these like rock stars buying movies to bring home. We even had Michael Jackson come with his limo in front and rent some movies, which he never returned. And I don't know if I should tell you what movies they were, but they were kind of the things he got in trouble with, which were, legal in Europe at the time. And anyway, and then one of the customers was Tarantino, and he was writing Pulp Fiction at the time. He was staying in Amsterdam near the Vondelpark. And every week he would rent a stack of movies, and would be either spaghetti westerns or Japanese movies or Hong Kong films. I was the first one who actually went to Hong Kong and came back with the biggest suitcase I could find with, I don't know, hundreds of VHS tape. And even if there were not subtitles, some of them were, if it wasn't, a crazy horror film, it was still a lot of fun to watch. And, I discovered John Woo and Chow Yun-fat and all these great filmmakers and actors, and Jackie Chan, of course. That was already known, but not that current time thing what was going on in Hong Kong, all these action films. And brought them all back, and it became a huge success. Also manga. I was the first one who had manga in my store, and
wow,
that got picked up. I recommended Polygram, who was actually my video distributor at the time when I did my first VHS releases. I recommended them to release manga. I told them that's going to be the next big thing, and obviously it's still to today,
Extremely popular, yeah.
Yeah, but Tarantino would come to the store, and we took some pictures, and that was picked up by some magazines, and until this day, they still write about it, and they still publish his photos in magazine. And one of the places he would visit was the Cult Videotheque.
I mean, obviously, we've heard throughout the years of how he's influenced by many of those films, and to think that many of those films were probably viewed because he got them from your shop is really interesting.
Well, he also had his own shop, and
right.
With that, he's now currently doing some kind of podcast. I met with Gala about this, what's his name, Roger Avery's daughter.
Yeah.
And it seems that, they're reviewing old VHS tape, and some of the films, interestingly enough, are films I've been releasing in the last couple of years, like Julia with Sylvia Kristel.
Yeah.
And My Night's Wit, Susan, Sandra, Olga, Yuli. by Pindala Para. And when he was in Holland, actually, last year to promote his book, he was talking in the Dutch press on TV or radio, or especially in newspapers, about Pim and Wim and these films, and he loved these films, and I was pleasantly surprised.
Fantastic. That I believe originally from the press that you got from the Tarantino stuff, that got you even more popular around that time, right?
Well, especially in Europe. I mean, in Europe, I became pretty well known. I basically had to go on every TV and radio, whatever. Pretty soon I declined it because I didn't want to be known for releasing, cannibal Holocaust or serial killer films and stuff like that. And I got kind of pigeonholed, I guess. I remember going to being on MTV, and I was like, nah, I don't think I want anything to do with that necessarily directly.
Right.
It's just my work in a way.
Well, before we get into the modern era of cult epics, you already mentioned Pig, and I'd love to hear, looking back on Pig, what you think of it, and even Sin and 1334 and some of the other stuff you've done, because I've wanted to see Pig for quite some time. Some of the visuals from it are pretty striking, and I would love to hear about the making of it, especially because we're going to be talking about Roz Williams and Christian Death, and obviously Roz seemed to be super important to you.
Yeah, he was a close friend of mine, and we made the film. It was hard. I mean, we just did it. But basically, we written the script, which I written, took about a couple of months, and then I remember I got married because I needed a green card, and at the time, and I remember the day after I came from Vegas, we started shooting the first scenes, and I said, "Ross, what are we doing?" He said, the torture scenes. And I was like, oh, great. So I remember I shot it on 60 millimeter. I had my own Arriflex. I already shot a film in Europe with Jodorowsky, actually. He stars in it. And some other people. But I never finished that film, actually, because I moved from Holland to America, and I shot half the film, and then I kind of put it on the shelf.
Right.
And so it was harsh sometimes to shoot, but it was also a lot of fun. Me and him, he was a funny guy, not your typical funny guy, but he had an immense sense of humor, and so me and him got along very well, and And sadly, after I finished the film, after 7 edits, I completed it, and he loved it. And sadly, he committed suicide right after, a month later.
For those that have not heard about Pig or seen it, could you tell everybody what the short is about?
Well, in short, basically, the plot is basically it's about a serial killer. Well, it's basically about Ross had these fantasies as a killer, to be a killer in real life. He was obsessed with Jeffrey Dahmer, Manson, whoever you could think of. And I said, well, what you're telling me you can't do in real life. You're going to get arrested and go to jail. And he was a pretty controversial figure. He was previously, when he had his biggest gig of Christian Death, at the Patriotic Hall, he got arrested for heroin and put in jail, and they had to bail him out to do the concert. So he was a pretty controversial figure. And, I said, let's make a movie instead. And that became Pig, actually. And what was the question again?
Just the synopsis for the story.
Yeah, so basically it was his fantasies he wanted to live out, and we did it in the film. The only difference was we didn't kill the guy because it was a serial killer. So I thought, well, we can use different bodies. We'll never show the face. And there were different fans. And they said, you can do this to me, or you could do that to me. And we were like, okay. I said to Ross, that's fine. And then eventually, a week before we started shooting, this guy from Texas showed up, this cowboy, and James. And he said, you can do anything to me, but you can't kill me. So we actually end up carving the title of the film with a razor blade in his chest. And after a few other things, he did started yelling and screaming, and he said, "No more torture. I only will act from now on."
Wow.
So it became pretty wild. But he's still proud of it. He still has that carving in his chest, and he didn't mind.
Wow, that's dedication. One of the things is the setting for where this person is taken from is in the desert, and you were on your way back from Vegas. I got to ask, do you remember where you filmed the desert scenes?
Yeah, that's it, near Death Valley, and obviously it actually has a little. If you pause the film, at one point you can see it on a rock. But we basically found this abandoned house that was actually near where he grew up, where his family lived, or actually where his family lived later. I think his father and mother. And there was an abandoned house, and it was really creepy, I must say. It already had all graffiti and stuff on the walls, perverse stuff, and there was no set design. Everything in the film is basically real.
Wow.
Yeah.
I ask primarily because I'm not sure if you know the name of the town, but I grew up in Barstow, which is about halfway from LA to Vegas, and a lot of people they're even I think Tarantino shot one of I think at the beginning of Kill Bill Volume 2 was shot there. The motorhome scene where the snake gets let loose in the motorhome. Aaron Brockovich was filmed and set around there. There's a bunch of movies that it's this really bleak and desolate place with a lot of abandoned houses.
I know it. I got stuck there one day. I tell you, like me and my friend, we actually drove the same car as in Pig, which was an old Jaguar, and the car broke down in Barstow or next to it, and they towed us to Barstow, and it's like, where the fuck are we? And I tried to get out of there, and we had to get on the Greyhound bus to Vegas to get there. It was crazy.
Oh Jesus!
And that car is probably still there. The car of Pig is in Barstow somewhere. I don't know where, but we left it.
I can't believe that. That's amazing. Yeah, Barstow has this weird, desolate, almost apocalyptic like setting that you could find the setting for anything like this that is meant to be depraved and depressing. And these abandoned houses with graffiti are kind of everywhere around there. It's shocking.
Yeah.
Love that. And then next after that, I think Sin was the next big one that you did, right?
Well, it wasn't a big one. It was basically, I was in love with this 1920s, 30s porn from France, which was, vintage. So it wasn't really porn in your face. It was, there was something artistic about it. There's something cool about it. And I mixed the music actually to each one of these films myself. And I got kind of inspired by that. The avant-garde, Man Ray, Cocteau, all these people, and the erotica. And I thought if you mix those two together, you kind of create an interesting atmosphere. I mean, later on, that was done in that famous big movie. That was a big movie called The Artist, the black and white film, which won Oscars. Well, I got that idea like 6 years before that, or my film was made 5 years before that. And I thought it was an interesting concept, making films like they used to,
Wow, yeah. With Sin, it's a very different style from what you had done previously with Pig, obviously. How did you find yourself as a filmmaker around that time? Were you enjoying this as well?
I don't know. I just was doing what I wanted to do. But Pig was shot on 8 and 16 millimeter. And Sin was on purpose shot on 8 millimeter, like in those days. And I just found some women I wanted to work with, I guess. And I was basically writing screenplays based on my real life. I just put them in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and just changed the characters and changed things, and make it, what I made.
Love that. With these, I believe the original release that you put out of Pig and 1334 are long out of print at this point, right?
Probably. I don't know.
I
don't keep track on
I think they've been like 11 years ago or something like that was released.
Probably, but these are underground films. I only did them like maybe 1,500 or 2,500 copies.
Right.
They're probably all gone, but I don't know. Maybe there's still some around.
For anybody that's interested, are they available anywhere for them to watch?
Well, you can get they're on my website, so that must be available still then. But sometimes I forget to take things down because I'm just busy with the next release instead of what's in the past.
Of course. Well, I mean, releases. I think that gets us into the modern era of cult epics, and we should probably talk about that because there's exciting things coming. There's exciting things that's happening, and really, the last I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years are kind of really setting the stage for what's going on right now. And a lot of it, funny enough, it is very Nico, to say it in a very personal way for you. There's Tinto brass everywhere. There's Sylvia, Kristel. There's some of the same titles. We still got our Blu-ray releases coming out of Bettie Page. What do you see the modern current era of cult epics as? Is that very different from the 90s era?
Well, I would say, sex, film, and rock and roll.
Yeah.
That's this year. But the last 5 years, literally, I've been releasing a lot of Dutch films. Obviously, yes. I'm from Holland. I was busy with Paul Verhoeven on his Dutch films. This producer was not cooperative. I met him several times. Rob Hauer. I hope one day he will be. But anyway, we nearly had a deal, and then he was coming up with some Betacam SP master for 4K UHD, and I was like, what's going on here? He just didn't get it. I guess the guy is 90-something. I don't know. Wow. And Paul couldn't help because the guy has control over the whole, Dutch films of his work, of his time. But looking at that, I was like thinking, well, there's other films I didn't know, actually. I started discovering. First was the Pindala Para films, Frank and Eve, and My Night's Wit. And I was like, whoa, these are amazingly shot or incredibly acted. And one of them was with Sylvia Kristel. And I was working on a couple of films I was thinking of with Sylvia Kristel. And then I did quite a few of them. We did a book on Sylvia Kristel, and she was obviously Dutch. She was known from Emmanuel, and that led me actually to Just Your Kin and start talking with him. And before he passed away, they did some 4K restorations and we did Madame Cloud, Last Romantic Lover, and Girls recently. Actually, I haven't released it yet. With that girl from Nikita, it was probably one of her first roles. Can't remember her name. Buckingham or something. But anyway, so these Dutch films kind of, I started looking into it more and more, and I met these female directors, and there was Noeske van Brakel, and I love her films. They're as good as the early Paul Verhoeven Dutch films. And then Marlene Goris, who had a reputation in the U.S. because of her feministic films, like A Question of Silence and stuff like that. And they're amazing films. They stood the time. And they're some of the best work ever made in Holland, the ones I released so far. But yeah, then suddenly I never released All Ladies Do It and Frivolous Lola on Blu-ray. And I always wanted to. And Arrow released it, but sadly the lab in Italy gave them kind of a bad master.
Unfortunately.
And that didn't look right. And so when I thought of licensing that, and somebody told me, well, how about 4K? And then I thought, well, I guess. So we went into it, and it took a year literally to transfer and restore these films to its best quality possible.
Wow.
And that probably will never come out as good as we will. We'll release them next month and the month after because we put a lot of work on it. Even the audio and subtitles was like an immense task, honestly, I must say. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to dive into some of the individual titles, but first, these current Tinto Brass titles are something that we probably should talk about. And for a company that's been around for so long, and this is the fourth home video format that you've worked on personally, VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, 4K.
It is. Yeah.
That I mean that's a lot of evolution. First of all, over the years and going through, all of the ups and downs of the different formats and the transfers to, this super high quality video, how do you feel about the evolution of these home video formats? Are you mostly happy with where we're at with 4K, or are you wanting to stick with Blu-ray? Are you, hesitant about certain things? Just how do you, as somebody that's been around for so long, how do you feel about it?
Well, sometimes we're very dependent on the producers or sales agents we work with. So I kind of work like a record company. So basically, I'm interested in artists. I meet them, I hang out with them, etc. And I said, I'm interested in releasing your films, like Radley Metzger.
Right.
And I think Tarantino is doing something on him. I have a feeling. But he was a guy, he was already in his 80s, and he suddenly got this call from me. And I was like, who's this guy? It's like, so we met, and, he had a book on Arabal, which I released films of. And it was Arabal, every picture of him naked with an erection. And we understood each other. We were laughing. And so we became friends. And then I started releasing his films and did the new transfers on Blu-ray, because the ones of whoever released them, I can't remember who it was, looked actually terrible, but the movies were amazing. Now, if that's the case, then I think films should be restored to its best quality. But some films, it makes no sense. Like even my films, I'm hesitating, Pig, makes no sense. It's shot on 16.
Right.
It's supposed to look underground. You don't want to see everything crisp and clear necessarily. It looks already great on Blu-ray, and compared to the VHS and compared to the DVD, because that came out first on VHS.
Right.
And other films, like Necromantic, shot on Super 8, I released. I cannot see that in 4K. Or even I recently saw Martin, which my favorite Romero film, and the 4K looks, as you can say, great, but the grain looks really grainy. And so this is not always good for certain films, and other films, yes. And I think certainly new films which are made in the last 10 years, it definitely will enhance the experience. But sometimes you may not want to see the mistakes a filmmaker made,
Right.
So I don't know. It's with Tinto Brass, I thought, well, he likes ass, obviously, in 4K. It couldn't look better, right? And sometimes it does, and sometimes I'm kind of like some shots, I'm kind of like, okay. Before you didn't see certain things, now you see everything. And luckily it's erotica, so it works really well. But with other films, I hesitate. I do want to do Angst. I think that's an amazing film. But certain films just belong in a certain format, I have a feeling, for a better experience. There's even films Criterion released, even some releases, I think Walkabout looks better on Blu-ray or DVD even than enhanced. I don't know. It's just not the same. And you suddenly have a different experience, which is not always better,
For the most part, I completely agree with that. I think that there are certainly some titles that have been released on 4K that are obviously a little worse for presentation wise than some of the Blu-ray counterparts. And it's disheartening for me that spends a lot of time with other collectors of home video that there are so many people nowadays that are getting to this point where they're saying, if this is not coming out on 4K, I'm not buying it. And I think that's going to hurt a lot of people in the industry if they start to do that.
Yeah, well, I think that's a mistake, because some films will maybe never be available in 4K because the producer or sales agent is not going to make that master. Okay.
Right.
So that's what us distributors or labels are dependent on. Anyway, for me, the main reason why I release films is it's about the film. It's not always about the quality. It seems quality seems to be more than 50% the criteria now. But, you want to have the film experience. I release films nobody was ever seen before, would have others seen otherwise never before if I didn't release them in the format they were. And they would never been re-released in another format. So if you don't buy them, then they're going to disappear, because if my rights expire and also the digital rights, so you can't find it digitally, then they're basically going to get lost. I mean, they're going to be on the second-hand market. Yeah.
Yeah, and that secondhand market is getting worse and worse every day right now for home video stuff because people are realizing, only so many movies were released on DVD, and then even less movies were released on Blu-ray, and of course, even less are going to come out on 4K. And some of those that were stuck back on VHS or DVD or never even got released before, if you ever come across any of these titles that were on any format that's long gone, that could be the last that we ever see of that film on home video. So people are jacking up those prices, of course.
It's highly possible, and they should be in libraries, basically.
I agree fully. And I mean, that's really kind of where Cult Epic shines, because there are so many of these movies that are nearly impossible to see otherwise. Many of these films people had not heard of. But the biggest thing that I really want to highlight for people that have never dove into cult epics in the modern sense, at least, is there are filmmakers here that are great at what they do, and generally, because of what you just said, you work kind of like a record label. You find an artist that you want to do multiple projects with. It's not often that there's only one title from a director, and based on that, you kind of have this curation that works to get people interested in multiple releases. And then when they like those, they go, well, maybe I'll like some of the other stuff as Nico has done. So one of the things I really wanted to highlight, Sylvia Kristel, you've done so much to make sure that Sylvia Kristel has a legacy even and is remembered and is memorialized in a really unique way. So what is your fascination with Sylvia Kristel?
Well, I don't have a personal fascination with her like I had with Bettie Page, but beautiful woman. But there's some films she did, like Emmanuel, especially part 2 actually of Emmanuel, is such a beautiful film, and she's so beautiful in it.
Right.
And even the films, she did one film with Borowczyk, La Marche. I've been trying to get pretty soon, I hope. And then there's some other stuff, and I looked into what's available, and it was difficult. And some of the masterpieces she did, she was what I like about her, she was actually doing a lot of art house films, and people these days are not aware of that she worked with everybody from Just Jakin, Borowczyk, I don't know, Alain Robbe-Grillet, which I released Playing with Fire of. People didn't know she did all these art house films before she moved to America and make kind of these, teenage movies or whatever you call them.
I am dying to pick up all the ones that I don't have from Cult Epics yet. And sadly, over the last year, there's just been a handful that I've not been able to get somehow. But Playing with Fire is one that the moment that it was announced, I was just so eager to see it, and the art on it is striking. Same with Amnesia. I think that was the one that came out right after that. And the art that you have for the cover on that is such a beautiful depiction of what I really see for Cult Epics, is this beautiful art piece that people that have, not discovered any of these filmmakers before, there's something about it that just draws you in. And I was going to ask you, Amnesia itself, how's that done for you? Is that one that's been a decent seller?
Not really through my current distributor, but it kind of missed its audience because it does have Carice van Houten.
Mm-hmm.
And her debut. This is Carice van Houten's debut TV and feature film, which is Amnesia, because we put the bonus films on there.
Right.
And she's fantastic. She's young, beautiful, naked, sexy, whatever you can think of. And if you watch Game of Thrones, you know who Carice van Houten is.
Exactly.
And it kind of missed that audience for some. And same thing with Fetje van Hout. He won, his film Character won an Oscar years ago, and he just did a horror film. I can't remember, with some Canadian. No, it's a Scandinavian horror film. He was second lead in, and that's a creepy movie that was released in America, but I can't remember the title now. It kind of and Martin Koolhoven. If you ever watch Brimstone, that's one of the bleakest films about American history in the way fabricated by him. and it's fantastic, and it's like a horror movie, but it's actually a drama. So it's
Right.
and he has made a film for a while, so that's why he's not in the spotlight. But it's difficult, for some of these films to find its audience. But I would definitely recommend them, and yeah.
Wow. The next one, the last era before the Tinto Brass stuff, was this big round of Marlene Goris titles. And
Right.
for those of us that have never been able to see a Marlene Goris movie, can you tell us what these are like?
Well, they're extremely provocative. It's like, and in the mind, kind of. And, people call them feministic films. And in the day, men they say, didn't like these films. But today, men would embrace these films. If you're a little open-minded, it's like, another experience. I mean, Broken Mirrors is basically a serial killer film and a brothel prostitution film, both in one. And but extremely artistically made and fascinating.
Yeah. And then The Last Island. This is one that when I posted the announcement for everybody, this movie sounds incredible. Are you a big fan of The Last Island?
It's her biggest film she ever made, I think. Well, no, she made some Miss Dalloway or something. She made some big Hollywood films, I think, later on. But at that time, this was the third in the trilogy before she made Antonio's Line, which is a kind of different film, which won an Oscar,
Right.
And there's some amazing stuff going on in The Last Island. I mean, it's it's very provocative, towards a lot of things, not only man, towards religion, all kinds of stuff.
Right. With a catalog like Cult Epics has, it's very easy, even if you follow Cult Epics closely, it's very easy to overlook one or two, or even like an entire filmmaker. I'm just super curious, is there any in like the modern Blu-ray line that you think people have slept on far too much, that you really wish people gave more love to?
Well, I guess I could only say that if something isn't successful in sales, I guess.
Right.
But, one of the films I really love is Mondo Weirdo.
Yeah.
And this was made by an Austrian filmmaker, and they didn't have many. The only other guy I knew was Gerard Carl of Angst. And this is complete underground. It's kind of like Richard Kern. I don't know if you ever heard of this guy. Richard Kern was, provocative, the New York underground transgression cinema in the 80s. And this guy was kind of like the European answer to it, but even more extreme in a way. Was more like, there's scenes of it which reminds you of Otto Muhl, which was the most provocative filmmaker ever existed, who had to go to jail quite a few times, I think, for the films he made. And I would not promote these films, but it was close to that. And the soundtrack is fantastic. It's like 80s wave, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so that one kind of, people pick it up. If you watch the trailers, you know, on YouTube, you'll know what you're getting. And anyway, yeah, that's one. But in general, all of my releases actually have been finding an audience. I was lucky that several digital platforms like Mubi, Criterion had picked up some of my latest releases.
Nice. Yeah, Mubi is a clear winner for some of these titles. Mubi does really great with curation. Obviously, they have a very human curated feeling behind it. But one of the big ones, too, that I wanted to shine on a little bit, and I don't think many of them are available now, but Jörg Buttgereit. You've put out a handful of his titles, at least 3, I think, right?
Four.
4. So with these, that's right. You also did Scram. This this filmmaker obviously is controversial one that a lot of people have attached to throughout the years. A lot of people have stayed away from throughout the years. What is there some sort of meaning behind these movies for you that made you want to share that with the world?
Well, to me, again, these are artistic films.
Yeah.
Especially if you're, necromantic is, you can see it. There's a lot of other stuff going on. But if you listen to the music and you see the way it's shot, it's to me like an artistic filmmaker. And if you watch that Todes King, Dead King, it's especially when it was made, it was groundbreaking, I think. And if you like underground cinema and controversial underground cinema, that's to watch, I think. And I knew York for a long time. I met him in Amsterdam when he came to my video store, and we made a deal on his films then already on VHS, because he was not allowed to sell his films in Germany or even ship across the border to other countries. I can't remember what the exact thing was going on.
Right.
But what Cult Epics did, or at the time, or Cult Video was actually, it was a mail order deal, was to import them and sell them back to Germany, sell them back to other countries in Europe for them as an in-between distributor. Yeah. And so when obviously Blu-ray came, then the thought came to me, well, it's not released. Who's doing it? I guess I was talking to Jörg, and then we just made a deal. Now they're already out of print. Well, they have maybe a handful copies left, but that's about it. But as I said, to me, 4K UHD doesn't make sense with Necromantic because it was shot on Super 8.
Right. But one of the things I was going to ask is there any hope of another U.S. release of those titles? Because obviously people still are really after them, and with pretty large print runs for those, they're out of print now. I feel like they could do pretty decent.
Well, they're still around. I mean, we made 10,000 copies or something like that of Necromantic, and the other one's probably, I don't know, 3 to 5, or Necromantic 2 maybe 7,500. I can't remember, or 5,000.
Right.
And so there you can still find them. The only problem is on eBay you won't find Necromantic. It's literally banned on eBay. And we couldn't even sell the box set. We did a great box set with the original soundtracks of the films. You can maybe find it on Amazon, but again, it has Necromantic in it, so nobody can sell it on eBay. Yeah.
Oh gosh. So the censorship that happens with some of these is so painful. Are there any? I don't know. I'm sure that you've had a lot of personal feelings about censorship throughout the years, but with the label, is there any fights that you've had to go through about censorship for getting things listed anywhere?
Well, the only thing, as I said, is Necromantic, and for the rest, no. And I would say fuck them.
Good. That's how it should be. Absolutely how it should be. It's ridiculous that we still have some people questioning even some of these modern films with honestly kind of prudish storylines that they're saying is too far, and it's ridiculous that some people want to stop selling some of these.
Well, yeah, people are too afraid now to make films like they made in the 70s and 80s. Yeah. And that's why I'm embracing this period very much these days.
And that makes sense. And like Tinto Brass is a really good example of one of those that he was doing stuff that was different from a lot of his contemporaries, even longer than many of his contemporaries. And you got a home for it here on Cult Epics. And that's, that's the immediate future. Over the next couple months, you got both of those coming out in 4K UHD. And with the two Tinto Brass titles, you had a Kickstarter campaign. You've had a couple campaigns that have gone through for some coffee table books for these releases. And does it seem like you have this really dedicated fan base to these campaigns? Yeah.
Well, the campaigns are actually mainly for the books I've been publishing. Since 8 years, I've been start publishing books, but I wanted to make nice books, nice. And you put on your coffee table with lots of illustrations. And we just finished the Tinto Brass, the films of Tinto Brass, from the avant-garde to erotica book, and I'm very happy with it. It looks great, and it took us a year though to make a book like that, to do it right. You need to take the time, and through that time, printing is expensive. We don't sell a lot. Books. These days, like 1,500, 2,500 copies. We're still sitting on 1,000 Sylvia Kristel books, and that was a massive book. And so it's difficult. So the only way to do books really is to do some crowdfunding through. We use actually Indiegogo because it's easier setup, and then we add items. Obviously, what they call them, perks.
Right.
For fans to get in advance special, slipcases or whatever they like, or posters. Or I made actually this amazing DVD. It's a trailer DVD of all the movies of Tinto Brass, all the trailers, and the ones I couldn't find a trailer of, I included a clip from the film. And I just watched it the other day, and it's really cool. It's like, whoa. This guy made all these films, and you'll be surprised. It's not only erotica, it's very provocative stuff. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that we mentioned earlier is another one that you've had a campaign before previously, and that is Christian death. And with how close you were to the situation, you've kept a lot of that legacy alive. You've put a lot of time and energy into making sure that people remember Roz and everything that went into a full career and art that went with it, and was a super influential person in many different ways. And you got an event coming up, right? You want to talk about that?
Sure. Yeah. So basically, I didn't think about, I think about Ross all the time, but I didn't think about releasing anything for about 25 years, 23 years or something, when I met Edward Culver, the punk rock photographer of, California punk rock, Dead Kennedys, etc. And he photographed Christian death in 81, 82, and I saw these photos, and there were amazing history of, he followed them around at gigs and did their album cover, and it's such a fascinating period, how Ross kind of changed from a transsexual into death metal guy, And if you look at this, the way he would dress and makeup, etc., and the music too, it developed into this Only Theater of Pain album, which is the classic of American goth, I guess, or death rock. And so, when I was doing that, I wanted to interview the people of the time, the pre-Christian death, the current Christian death of that time, of Only Theater of Pain, who recorded that album. And so through that, I started realizing, okay, these people have some interesting stories. And so I kept on interviewing people for the last 2 years. And from that, the documentary was born. And we already started editing, and I'm very happy with the editor, and it looks amazing. And we're just trying to finish it by the summer and, play it at festivals and stuff. And for that, we're now doing some fundraising through a concert, actually, at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, where Ross, his ashes and his memorial is. I put up 25 years ago. And next door is the Masonic Lodge, and it's a beautiful space. And that's where we're doing the concert with Sheetan's new band, and Rick Agnew, James McCarthy of Only Theater of Pain, Christian Death, their new band called Symbolism, and Ross's ex-wife, Eva O, doing Shadow Project and Christian Death material.
Oh gosh, so you are so attached to the music industry throughout the years, and now I got to ask, with the home video side of it and the music sort of intertwined with dual passions for a lot of us, how do you feel about just the immediate future? Because obviously home video is constantly, like I said earlier, being told that it's on the decline, and music going the way of streaming and all of that. How optimistic are you for the next, we'll say, 10 years of home video and the music industry?
Well, for myself, not so optimistic, because I kind of want to do something else.
Interesting.
So I hope somebody comes along who say, hey, I can continue Cult Epics for the next 10 years, because there are still plenty of films I can think of. But I'm basically moving into directing more underground films. Well, not really underground, but erotic, I guess, which I'll be shooting outside of the US in the next years. And I will be producing some films as well. And that's kind of my next thing. I mean, you kind of, you start selling things in a video store, then you start a label, and then you kind of end up producing, directing, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where my life is taking me without even thinking about it. But I have another documentary in mind, actually, about a musician, which I can't talk about yet. And anyway, I'm just doing what I'm doing, I guess.
So what about the immediate future of Cult Epics? Are you still planning on doing this for at least a little while? You have other releases lined up after Tinto Brass?
Well, we have quite a few other Tinto Brass actually came our way.
Oh.
And so they will also be released on 4K UHD. And I can't talk about much yet. And so some of the contracts have not been signed yet. And then some other 4K, yes. And then some, I digged into Italian cinema and recently, and there's some amazing cult classics there that nobody ever thought of,
Right.
And by accident, I came across them. And so I'm working on quite a few because I'm kind of moving into different directions. So I'm kind of like, not sure what I want to do yet with it.
Well, that's fascinating. So anybody listening that is super interested in Cult Epics and happens to have the ability to to do and carry on this legacy, maybe reach out to Nico, because the curation here is a big deal, of course, but there's a lot of potential here, and it seems like the home video market is hungry for these 60s, 70s, 80s, early 90s, staples from filmmakers that don't get a lot of attention, and Cult Epics is continuously shining those lights.
Thank you.
Let's see. I think that's all I've got on Cult Epics, but I mean, one of the big things that I want to know is the person behind Cult Epics. What is, other than, the Cult Epics type stuff, are there any other filmmakers that you love that you've never been able to put on Cult Epics? Anybody that you're, super passionate about?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, my only goal in life is to create awareness for art, and not only film, like I already explained, music, but also fine art. Actually, I'm a curator in photography and fine art as well, which I kind of want to integrate into Cult Epics more, which I've been wanting to do, making beautiful prints of like that Amnesia artwork we have created. Even Dead Lay the Neck would be an amazing print of the last artwork we did for the slipcase. Stuff like that. I want to do a Cold Wines. I want to make my company a little bigger than it is now. Also, we're changing the website, so it has so much potential as a brand.
Right.
And but as I said, I will start this all, but then it would be good if somebody else could do that, in the future. Yeah.
Love that. I mean, you've also set the table for somebody to step into an important legacy, one that has, again, a lot more potential, and with that, could fulfill shoes that could lead to bigger and better things for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I mean, there's still plenty of films to be released. I think the mistake with a lot of labels is they're basically just releasing the same thing over and over, and that's a pity because I have 5 copies of House by the Cemetery or something. It's like, but no critique to Blue Underground. I love those guys, but
right.
It's kind of like, we want to see films we haven't seen before, I think, and should be discovered, and makes you think and enjoy, and whatever it takes.
Interesting. Well, I mean, that's probably going to wrap it up for me, Nico. I appreciate you taking the time today. I really hope that people take a look at Cult Epics, because, again, it's one of those companies that is obviously cult, and a lot of people don't take the time to investigate past art sometimes, or they're turned off by one title and they say, oh, the label will only do that sort of thing. But Cult Epics is kind of all over the place, and it's very much a label that I think there's something here that probably every person would be able to find at least one title that they absolutely love. So, I really think if you've never taken a look, this would be a really great opportunity to look into Cult Epics further.
All right. Well, all of these films or filmmakers have, or even the actors, some of them have some kind of cult following. And that happened either before or it's something I created. And that happened with Deathbed, The Bed That Eats, a film nobody knew about and became a huge success. And, it's just a matter of time.
All right, Nico, I fully agree with you. Again, thank you for taking the time today, and hope to be able to talk to you again in the future.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you for listening to the Disconnected Podcast. There's one big thing that you could do to help the show, and that is to leave a rating and review on the podcast service of your choice. Thank you.
If you're looking for more horror outside of the mainstream, look no further than Unsung Horrors, a podcast about underseen horror movies. I'm Lance.
And I'm Erica. Every other week, we'll cover a horror movie with fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. We'll even give you double feature recommendations to pair with the movies we discuss.
From gothic to shot on video, from slashers to comedies, from giallo to J-horror, we'll cover all the subgenres. So join us as we unearth these hidden gems of horror.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Unsung Horrors, available wherever you listen to podcasts. And part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.